Hello Proponomics people, and welcome to day 19 of the Proponomics Advent Calendar for December 2023. And today's subject is vendor finance. So this has been an incredibly important part of a toolkit for 2023 to get deals done, because we've been dealing with a much higher interest rate environment. And I've used it a number of times in different ways and means in 2023, and will be continuing to do so throughout 2024 to get deals done. So what does it mean? Well, it means using the vendor's money or the vendor's asset. Quite often you're dealing with an unencumbered asset if you're dealing with a vendor when it's a retirement sale, and the vendor actually is not really in need of all of that money right now. They might be settling a tax position. They might need some of the money. They might just be fed up of the day-to-day of active property management and just want an easy life and be happier with what might look like a 4 or 5% return, even though at the moment they could get that in the bank. That's not likely to last, whereas a 5-year arrangement with you managing the property, offering them some security, might well still give them something that they need. So what's going on and when do we use it? Well, it's actually a concept that's generally borrowed from commercial property. So in commercial property, it's quite common for a company to want to liquidate an asset from its balance sheet. Perhaps it's a material change of strategy and they're happy with the income stream, but they've decided, for example, they're not a property company. They're actually, could be, a care home company, or they're actually a retail company. They don't want and they don't need to own property. And also, if you looked at, for example, retail property since the 2007, you'd find that actually it's dropped in value fairly significantly. So there isn't necessarily guaranteed capital appreciation on the balance sheet in commercial properties. It needs to earn money. It might just be they need to liquidate a partial amount of the position, but let's say that vendor could leave 30% behind and a funder could provide 70%, then you would find yourself one of those legendary no money down deals. And as I say, the bigger the asset, the more common this sort of arrangement is. Is this the sort of arrangement that you're going to go and get a communal garden, bog standard buy-to-let mortgage against, where the vendor's going to give you 25 or 30k and the lender's going to lend you the rest, and you're going to go through a simplistic broker process? No, it's not. Those sort of lenders don't like this sort of thing. It's a commercial bank style arrangement. But there are several lenders who can get comfortable with it and do get comfortable with it. You may pay a little bit more on the rate because there's always the skin in the game argument. But of course, the vendor doesn't have to top up all of the finance. You might be getting 70% from the bank, 25% from the vendor, and then 5% plus the frictional costs of purchase. You might still have to find out of pocket, but it might still work very well. And why does this work so well? Well, this tracks back to the weighted average cost of debt and the weighted average cost of capital, which is a video from a few days ago. Because what are you effectively saying? Let's go back to 2020 to try and understand this. So let's say in 2020 you did a deal and you paid 3% on 75% mortgage. And let's say at the time you also paid an investor 1% a month, so 12% a year, on the 25% deposit and the 5% or so frictional costs that there are in buying any deal, right? So let's say again, property price was 100k, so you need 105k in total. You had 75k at 3%, and then you had 30k at 12%. So if you remember our weighted average calculations, you'll realise you're paying a lot more than 3% overall for the cost of that debt. Now instead, let's imagine you could do the deal with the vendor. You could give the vendor the price that they wanted, but we're in 2023 now, and the vendor is happy with a 4% return on their money, and they just want to liquidate the asset and be free of the hassle of property ownership. That exactly mirrors a deal that I've been involved in this year. So then, instead of worrying about the weighted average cost of debt going up to 5-6%, because I'm paying so much on what we call that top slice over and above the top of what the bank is providing, instead you're getting a weighted average cost of debt of 4%, because that's what the vendor has provided for you. So actually it's cheaper to do it that way. How will you then pay the vendor back? Because at some point in the future you're going to need to pay them back. Well, it might well be something that looks like about a 5.5-year arrangement, so that the vendor can get repaid when you've got an achieved capital growth, either through solid asset management strategies, capital appreciation, ideally adding value so you can guarantee that capital growth, and you pay the vendor back after 5.5 years and swap that debt out. By the time you've achieved that uplift, You swap the debt out for bank senior debt, which in 5 years' time should look something like that 4% that you've agreed, hopefully. And then you've been able to manage that asset with a weighted average cost of debt of only 4% for the 5 years, and should have made a nice healthy profit on it in those interim 5 years as well. So, can happen, especially at the end of near financial years. So particularly look out for these sorts of deals in Q1 of 2024 as people approach their tax return. They might be considering their capital gains tax position. Landlords exiting the market have got 4 or 5 properties. Perhaps they're unencumbered, but they don't want to pay all the CGT. Even though the capital gains allowances have been trimmed, people still make fairly irrational decisions when it comes to paying tax, and there might well be a vendor finance situation available. And it's one of those perverse situations where the more you've got, the easier it is to get vendor finance, unfortunately. But I have known people do these deals as their first deal, and I think you can do it too.